What if India had never been colonized? So, in our timeline, as everyone knows, India came under the eventual control of the British Empire. With the weakening of British power after World War II, figures such as Gandhi proved successful in creating an independent India. But what if India was never colonized? First, we must examine how India was colonized. The Portuguese, who arrived in 1498, were the first Europeans since the Romans who made it to India for trade by sailing. Soon they established a trading center in southern India, and followed by the Dutch East India Company, British East India Company, and the French. However, the Battle of Plassey, in which the British East India Company won a decisive victory over the Nawab, or leader of the Indian state of Bengal, was a deciding factor in the history of India. So the word decisive in this case means pretty decisive. About 50,000 soldiers on the Bengali side lost to like 3,000 soldiers on the East India British Company side. This followed an era in which the British East India Company increased their power over India. So why were the British able to conquer India in this battle and the ones that followed? The main reason was that the once powerful Mughal Empire was breaking apart as local rulers grew disobedient and a new power called the Marathas moved into Mughal land. Also, the British were able to use better tactics against the Indians and had a better navy and used the Industrial Revolution to further improve their chances in the subcontinent. So things are looking pretty bad for India. However, let's say that in an alternate timeline, the British were somehow pushed out of India, maybe by a temporary alliance between Indian rulers. The Brits suffered such a heavy defeat in some battle that they decided it's not worth it. Although this is unlikely, what would India look like today? First of all, you might say that some rival European power might take over. This is likely, as the French were a potential threat to British power in the region. In our timeline, the British crushed much of the French territories in India during the French and Indian War. However, our scenario deals with what would happen if India was never colonized. So let's say that the French were defeated as well. The subcontinent is composed of many diverse groups and cultures, and without the unifying power of the British, it is likely that dozens of small states and a few major powers would occupy the subcontinent during the 1700s, as was in our timeline. The Maratha Empire, which consolidated much of India before the fall to the British, would likely somewhat fill this power vacuum. Before the rise of the British, the Marathas were already expanding their rising empire. However, outside of this empire's boundaries, it is likely that the subcontinent will be split up into a patchwork of tiny states. The states will be likely in different states of development throughout the 1800s, with some fully industrialized and resembling the West, while other states will be poor and largely rely on traditional agriculture. The nation would still industrialize in this era, although it will happen in a bit more slowly manner without the presence of the British. India has traditionally followed the disintegration of empires into tiny states and the reconsolidation of these empires, so it is likely that by the 20th century the Maratha Empire would have disintegrated, or at least be weakened from its peak in the 1700s.